Alright, hello everyone. So this is going to be a really big video. Probably a two-part video. And here's how it's going to basically work. I'm going to be reviewing every single Spider-Man movie, a bunch of shorts, pretty much, or one episode of every single Spider-Man show, the most popular episode of each of those shows. As well as some merchandise and some other just random Spider-Man stuff like video games and along with that. So I'm going to be reviewing all of it. Half in this video, half in another video. All of this stuff leading up to No Way Home. Hopefully we'll get to see the different Spider-Men together, and that'll kind of be this perfect little bow on this little series. You'd hear that I'm losing my voices because I've recorded over an hour of footage. I'm actually recording this last. But we're going to go ahead and get right into it. I just kind of wanted to pop up here and say there will be spoilers. And obviously I know from watching other people's YouTube videos, it gets kind of obnoxious whenever you go into a video this big and they don't really include the order of when they're going to be talking about stuff. So right here on your screen right now is when I will be talking about everything that I'm talking about in part 1, and I'll do the same thing at the beginning of part 2 so you can see, you know, every single thing that's going to be in part 2. So everything that you're seeing on screen right now is what is in this video in that particular order. But with that being said, obviously spoilers for everything Spider-Man. Let's go ahead and let's get right into this.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Good morning, New Yorkers. Looking forward
An adventure.
The Amazing Spider-Man 1977 is a surprisingly good film. This is an interesting retelling of the origins of Spider-Man. From the very start, I really like the shots of the spider slowly crawling towards Peter. And once he's bitten, it's kind of funny how quickly and easily Peter is able to run up a wall. Not to mention how unintentionally hilarious watching Peter crawl around on all of the buildings and on top of the buildings are throughout the film. Something I really like is how he creates the costume idea based on a conversation with J. Jonah Jameson, who's a really good character throughout these films. And honestly, the suit looks great outside of the mask, and the villain's plan was pretty good even if the villain himself was kind of boring. The film starts off really good, but I can't lie, as the film goes on, the second half gets more and more boring. I don't know if I'll ever rewatch this film, but I gotta be honest, I'm really glad that I did watch this film, as it's a Spider-Man film that I had never seen before. Alright, now let's get into the sequel, Spider-Man Strikes Back. This time around, the story gets going much quicker. One thing that I noticed really quickly is that there's a lot of new characters, which I assume is because of the TV show that was airing along with the release of these movies. Something that kind of shocked me is how often this film uses the spider sense, which is a nice addition as we really didn't see it in the first film. The biggest problem is that even though I like a lot of these changes, it unfortunately loses much of the magic that the original Spider-Man film had. One thing that did interest me while watching this film is the idea of seeing some bigger Spider-Man storylines in this style with these specific actors. One thing that I did really like about this film though is the storyline of J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man going on a trip to Los Angeles together. There are a lot of fun and really unique ideas that come out of this concept, and honestly I wouldn't mind seeing this exact concept play out in one of the newer Spider-Man movies with some of the new actors. Alright, Spider-Man Dragon Challenge is by far the worst of this trilogy, but it's also the final film. By the time I got to this film, I was really ready to go and see a new actor portray Spider-Man, and honestly, all the magic of the other two Spider-Man movies in this trilogy were kind of gone by the time we got to Dragon Challenge. So I don't really ever see myself rewatching this one, and other than that, I've not got that much to say. My page of notes for this film were really short, and yeah.
So here's how this video is going to work. In between every series of films, I'm actually going to do a little bit of an intermission, and this is the first of those intermissions before we get to the Tobey Maguire series. So for this first little intermission, I actually wanted to talk about the Spider-Man musical, Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. The reason why I wanted to talk about this is because I'm a huge fan of musicals, and if you think a Spider-Man musical sounds weird, well it is, but don't worry because Shrek the Musical is a really good Broadway musical already, so if Shrek can pull it off, I'm sure Spider-Man can. Unfortunately, his musical isn't one of my favorites, but the way I'm actually going to talk in this segment is I'm actually going to do my top 5 songs that appear in Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. Up in 5th place I have No More. It feels very Disney musical for a song, but it's not really that bad, and I have listened to it a few times while preparing this video, and it's an alright song. DIY World is in number 4 slot. It has a very unique sound, and at first I didn't love this song, but it really started to grow on me, and I actually do think that I like it more than the song No More. In the 3rd place spot I have If the World Should End. it's not my favorite, but it is a very powerful song in the show. And from the few times that I've listened to it, I do enjoy it. Up at number two, that's not how you speak. Up in the second place spot, I have I Just Can't Walk Away, which is a really fun song, and that's really all I can say about it. I like the characters interacting in the song, and it works pretty well. And obviously, number one, A Freak Like Me Needs Company. Villain songs are always the best. I'm a huge fan of villain songs in musicals in particular. And they're always the best, and this one doesn't disappoint. It holds up really well. Green Goblin does a really good job of being like the lead vocalist in the song, and it works really well. But I'm sure you guys are ready to get to the Tobey Maguire series, so that's going to be the end of this intermission.
Alright, now for the trilogy that you've probably all been waiting for, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man trilogy. So I don't have this really close connection to these films that a lot of people online seem to have. I've seen them all once or twice, but the only one that I really remember distinctly anything that happens in the film is the third one. And that is because I remember that Burger King had a set of toys, and I had one of them growing up, and it was a little Spider-Man that you could put in the refrigerator and he would change colors, kind of like a mood ring. It was a pretty cool toy, but either way, now that I've rewatched these films, I have a lot to say about them, so let's just go ahead and get into the first one, which is Spider-Man 2002. Tobey's Peter is way more nerdy than I remember, and the dialogue in this film is very wonky. The transformation was actually really cool in this film, as it actually kind of looked painful, which wasn't what I was expecting, because usually, it highlights the best parts of being Spider-Man in these films. Getting to see him learn more about his powers is really fun. That was whenever I started really enjoying myself when watching this film, was once he first started getting his powers. And it's a really solid origin story for Spider-Man. I noticed with the Green Goblin, whenever he was using the pumpkins to attack, the skeletons that the people turned into were kind of it caught me off guard in a kind of funny way that I didn't expect. But I still don't like the Green Goblin's design in this film. I've seen a lot of people online talk about it, and I think the general consensus is that people really like the Green Goblin's design in this film, but it just didn't stick with me. I kind of feel bad for every single character in this film, whether they are a hero or villain or side character. Everyone's story is really sad, which I know that that's what a lot of people really appreciate about this films, but I don't mind a little bit of sad in my Spider-Man superhero films, but I also want there to be more moments of Spider-Man being this really relatable, fun character, and a little bit less of this kind of more sad, while still being relatable. It's just kind of a little too sad and brings down the overall film for me. Also, it does have a cool villain. It just takes it a while to get there. The Thanksgiving scene is one of the best in the film, which I had actually heard in some YouTube video at some point. I'm sure that you have probably seen the one that I'm talking about. I'm not for sure what it is. But I remember years back watching a video about the Thanksgiving scene, and I agree, it's a really, really good scene. The Norman reveal to Peter was really cool, and the twist of them not getting together at the end caught me off guard, but I really liked it. With that being said, I thought this was a decent film. It's probably the best of the films that I've watched so far, and I'm very curious to see what happens in Spider-Man 2. Without even watching the film, Spider-Man 2 should be my favorite, mainly because it uses my favorite villain, Dr. Octopus. Unfortunately though, it's just not quite there. I still think it's a decent film, but there are problems that I just kind of want to highlight. But before we get into that, the pizza time scene is really fun, and Harry gets really interesting in this film. Harry as a character I didn't really care much for him in the original film, but I feel like once they started really getting into the plot of him having a problem with Spider-Man, it started getting a lot more interesting. Tobey's Peter is a lot more sad than he even was in the first film, which I know a lot of people really praised the film for, that it's a little bit of a darker, more relatable Spider-Man story, but I just really didn't love that. I do like Doc Ock in the film. Now that I've seen the PlayStation 4 game, which at the time I know people hadn't seen yet, but the PlayStation 4's version of Dr. Octopus is forever going to be my favorite version. I don't love the webbing on on Peter Parker's suit. I know that's probably another unpopular opinion, but I like the MCU's look better. I think even if it is mostly CGI, it looks better whenever he's swinging around and he's in action. But the scene where Dr. Octopus fights the surgeons is also a really cool scene. And I do like how he gets the name Doc Ock through J. Jonah Jameson, which I haven't talked about yet, but he is one of the funniest parts of these films. The Harry arc is something that I really feel like the new films are missing, being the MCU films. I feel like they could really use a lot if maybe Ned was going through this, which at the time of recording this, not all of the MCU Spider-Man trilogy is out yet. So there's a chance that could change. But this film is mainly showing the consequences of every choice that Peter made in the first film. Peter rejects Mary Jane in the first film, and now MJ gets engaged in this film. And Peter takes out the Green Goblin, and now Harry hates him for that. The scene of him leaving the suit is cool, the one that's referencing the comic. And it does have a really slow start, but once it gets to Act 3, it's almost a perfect film. Where people talk about Spider-Man 2 being the best Spider-Man film, I don't see it for the most part, but once Act 3 hits, I do see it. It really does flow perfectly. The final fight with Doc Ock is also good, and MJ and Harry both finding out, and the setup to Harry as the Green Goblin in the next film is really cool. So I'm excited to see what happens with that one. I remember growing up liking Spider-Man 3 the best out of them, and I don't know if that's going to continue, but I know most people online do not agree with that, so we'll see how it goes for me whenever I rewatch it. Okay, you guys really aren't going to like me for this one. I think Spider-Man 3 is the best out of the Tobey Maguire trilogy. Gwen Stacy, I didn't even know that she was in this film. I had no memory of that, but she is in it. She doesn't do very much in the film, but she's there. And Harry is already such a good character. That's kind of the note that I took whenever I was watching the film, because, I think even though Doc Ock is my favorite, Spider-Man villain, in this particular trilogy, I think that Harry is my favorite. His interpretation of Green Goblin is my favorite. The symbiote kind of comes out of nowhere in this film. If I had one complaint about the Venom stuff, it's just how out of nowhere that it came, especially since Peter Parker has, spider sense, so he should have felt that was coming. And I do gotta ask, was this film made for 3D? Was 3D, was it in that weird stage where, every film coming out was, really pushing 3D? Because a lot of the web slinging and stuff being thrown around looks like it's being made and designed for 3D. Sandman's story is kind of cool. He's not my favorite. I've never loved his character. I think it's kind of a little boring. But, having him in there is alright. It's decent. But his CGI does hold up really well, which kind of shocks me. Eddie is interesting, but he's not my favorite version of the character. That version of Eddie we'll talk about a little bit later in this video. MJ's subplot is pretty cool in this film, one of the better ones that she has throughout the trilogy. And I like the marching band version of the Spider-Man theme. I wasn't expecting it, but I haven't loved what they do with the Spider-Man theme in this film, where it seems like it's normally just always thrown in there. But this is the one time where I thought it was really cool the way they used it. The symbiote suit reveal was really cool, and it reminds me of Iron Man 3, where it's where we're really seeing Peter Parker, have to learn to work without his main suit and abilities, kind of giving up being Spider-Man, kind of similar to how Iron Man 3 in the MCU works. The dance scene is funny, even if it is a little out of place. I know everybody loves that scene, and I think it's pretty good. And the revenge is kind of the theme of this film, which I find interesting for a Spider-Man film, because it's normally just your stereotypical responsibility theme. So it is cool that it takes a little bit of a darker approach in that way. It's a little too wacky at parts for such a serious story, though. Venom and Sandman team up is something that I didn't know that I wanted, but I do now, and I think it works really well. And the perfect end to Harry's arc at the end of this film, which perfectly, like I said, wraps it all up and really does make him one of the standout parts of this trilogy. The best final fight scene in the Raimi movies. Of the three of these, I really like the way the final fight scene works. I don't love that Mary Jane is always the person who is, in danger. I would have liked to have seen anyone else, but with that being said, it's a pretty solid end to the trilogy. And before we get into the next trilogy, or it's not even a trilogy, it's more of just two films, the Andrew films. Before we get into that, I actually want to take a little moment to have another little intermission.
Alright, I guess we've already made it to our second intermission. For this one, I'm actually going to be taking a look at a short that I found on Netflix, which is Lego Spider-Man Vexed by Venom. Spider-Man having a motorcycle in this short was kind of funny. They kind of, played into it a little bit, kind of referencing how it was, more convenient for him. And I thought it was funny. It was a funny little gag, probably only in there to sell Lego sets, but that's alright. I wish we could have gotten a full-length Lego Spider-Man movie, like how we got the Lego Batman movie and the Lego Ninjago movie, which maybe I'll talk about those at some point on the channel. I feel differently about different ones of those films. I'm kind of shocked that we got a Peter school scene in this short. That was kind of unexpected, just because I expected this short to only have him as Spider-Man. The Ghost Spider reveal was unexpected, even though I should have known that. Her shirt had a spider on it. I should have known that Gwen Stacy was gonna be Spider-Gwen, or the Ghost Spider in the short, but I didn't. I really like that Doc Ock was at the end, because Doc Ock's one of my favorite villains in Spider-Man. That's all I've really got to say about this short. There wasn't too much going on. Spider-Man and Venom fought in mechs at one point, which was kind of crazy, but I don't know. I thought this would be a fun one to put as a little intermission, because I probably wasn't going to get to talk about many Lego Spider-Man projects in this video, and I saw this as an opportunity. Now it's time to get into the Spider-Man series that a lot of people seem to not like the most, and that's the Amazing Spider-Man series. Seeing Peter's parents is really strange, but actually opening the film with young Peter I thought was a really cool way to start the film, and it was something that I really liked to see. Can you take pictures of my boyfriend's car was kind of a little funny gag that they had right at the start of the film. The school stuff is way more relatable than the initial Tobey Maguire films, and I gotta be honest, in the comics I prefer Gwen over Mary Jane, and in the film I kind of feel the same way. I really like Emma Stone's version of Gwen Stacy. I like that they show a lot more of Uncle Ben being a father figure than before his death, unlike in the original films. And I like that Gwen is way more involved with the plot being linked to Connors. The color grading in this film tops anything that we've seen so far, and I really like seeing him struggle with his strength whenever he first becomes Spider-Man. You see him break a lot of stuff. It has a really, really good soundtrack. I'd say that about a lot of the movies on this list, but it really does have a good soundtrack. And even though it's very cheesy, I do like the basketball scene. I really like the comedy of him whenever he is Spider-Man, opposed to when he's Peter Parker. The movie does drag on a little bit, though. That's the first real complaint I have. I felt like it took forever for anything interesting to happen, but whenever interesting things were happening, it was really good. The Lizard's transformation scene is really cool. I like that he tells Gwen Stacy that he's Spider-Man very quickly, and a scene where he saves the kid from the car is almost a perfect Spider-Man scene. The Lizard talking is a little weird. I didn't like the way that looked. And if the rumors of all the villains from all the different multiverses, or different universes, coming into the, if the theory that they all won in their specific universes and actually beat their Spider-Man, I'm very curious to see what the Lizard story will be in No Way Home. Because it really does set up that if he won, it really would have messed up his, universe. Honestly, I thought the sad moments in this film and the way they carried it were way better than the way they were carried, the sad moments in the Raimi films, and that's a very unpopular opinion, but I do. And the last thing I have to say about this film is it does have an end credit scene, but I gotta be honest, it's really boring. There's not much going on in it, and that's The Amazing Spider-Man. I think this might be the most notes that I have for any of the films, but the way that I feel about this film I think might actually shock you. The Amazing Spider-Man 2. The opening scene on the plane is actually really cool. I know a lot of people complain about it, but I did like the way it happened. Just watching Spider-Man help people in that montage at the beginning of the film is really fun. And also we get to see Ryan from The Office, which is, it's not actually Ryan from The Office, but it's Ryan from The Office. I like to see this version of Norman Osborn. I didn't like him as much as the original version, but he was alright and brought some new things, so I did like to just see Norman Osborn in the story. An interesting take on Electro, but I don't really like the way Electro was handled in this film. And Harry is a really cool new take on the character. I think he is the standout villain of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I actually kind of believe their friendship, which was another thing that I really liked. I don't like the blue design of Electro, just because it felt too weird and kind of out of nowhere. I actually don't hate the dubstep the first time that they fight. I feel like I should hate it a lot more, and whenever it comes back in later in the film, I didn't like it as much. I like this version of Aunt May. She might actually be my favorite of the three. I like this stuff with Peter's parents at first, but especially in the first film, but once it gets to this one, it's just way too much going on in that story, and that really should have been pushed way out of the story. I don't like the twist that only Peter Parker could become Spider-Man because it has to have his blood or be part of his bloodline. I think that kind of takes away a lot of the character and is one of the worst decisions that this film made. The dubstep doesn't work, like I said, whenever it comes back in the second time. And this, honestly, this could have left out everything with Electro and just put more Harry in. Harry should have been the main villain of the film. And then let's get to the elephant in the room. Gwen's death is one of the most powerful scenes in any of the Spider-Man movies that I've seen so far, with the web hand and the metaphor for running out of time with the fact that they're fighting in a clock itself. Not to mention the amazing acting. The best acting from Andrew in both of the films is in this one right here. Then, of course, they set up the Sinister Six, which we'll probably never see unless No Way Home somehow, makes it work. And what I'll say is this is probably the most artsy Spider-Man film that we've gotten. If that's not what you're looking for, then this definitely probably wasn't that good of a film for you. But for me personally, I think this is a really, really good film. And that's all I can say. It did its job. It made a very, very good Spider-Man film. I know it gets a lot of hate, but it's definitely a step up from the original Amazing Spider-Man. Alright, so really quick right here at the end of the video, I'm actually just going to kind of go through and talk about a whole bunch of the Spider-Man shows. All the shows that I don't get to in this particular video, I'm going to talk about in the next video. And I'm going to only describe all of these shows in just a few words so we can kind of knock it out rapid fire. Also, the way that I'm going to do this is I'm only going to watch the most popular episodes of each of these shows, just so that I don't have to watch hundreds upon hundreds of episodes of Spider-Man. The first Spider-Man animated series was unintentionally hilarious in a way that I didn't really expect. The next show is Spider-Man 1981, and so many great memes have came from that show, so I think that was worth noting. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends had really surprisingly good animation that I wasn't really expecting from a show from that point in time. Spider-Man the Animated Series actually forced me to watch a two-parter because I actually didn't watch through the entire show of any of these. I watched like the top 2 or 3 episodes, and I had to watch more episodes of this show than any other because the most popular episodes are all two-parters. But either way, it is a really good series, but it was a little too serious for me. Spider-Man Unlimited. I don't like his suit in this series. That's all that I really have to say, and I don't like the design of Carnage and Venom, which were both in a lot of the most popular episodes. Spider-Man 2003, Barney Stinson is Spider-Man, which is amazing.
It's gonna be legend. Wait 20 years for it. Dairy. Legendary.
Or I guess I should say legendary. And Spectacular Spider-Man, the theme song is awesome. And we'll actually cover the rest of these shows over in the very next video. But for now, I think that's good, so we'll go ahead and go to the final segment. And with that being said, that's the end of part 1. So obviously, I've reviewed a ton of stuff, but there's still a lot more to come. We have everything Spider-Man in the MCU. We have the PS4 games that I'm going to talk about. We have the Venom films. We have Into the Spider-Verse. And a lot more stuff coming in part 2, so make sure you come back and check that out. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure you smack the like button. A lot of work went into it, and a lot of time watching Spider-Man stuff. Like, a lot of time. Also, let me know if you would like to see me do this same type of series with another character. I haven't seen many of the Batman films, and I've thought about doing it with Batman. And the Fantastic Four is like my favorite superhero team, so I'd kind of like to also watch all the Fantastic Four movies and shows. So just let me know what you guys are thinking. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time in part 2.